Stop. Before you scroll, I need to ask you one question. What if the person you're meant to meet has already started leaving signs in your life, and you've mistaken every one of them for coincidence? Most people miss these signs forever. But if you're watching this today, there's a reason. Because the final sign I'm about to reveal changes the way you see your entire life. Have you ever had a moment so quiet, so ordinary, that it almost disappeared before you noticed it? And yet, hours later, you couldn't stop thinking about it. Not because it was dramatic, but because something deep inside you whispered that meant something. Most people dismiss those moments. They call them coincidence, fatigue, wishful thinking. But what if one of those moments wasn't random at all? What if your soulmate has already begun reaching your life, not through a message on your phone, not through a perfect chance meeting, but through signs so subtle that only your heart can recognize them? Stay with me, because the final sign isn't one you'll see with your eyes. It's one you'll feel. And once it happens, you'll never look at your life the same way again. There is a strange kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It's the feeling that someone is missing, even when you've never met them. It can happen in the middle of a crowded grocery store, while sitting in traffic, or during an ordinary Tuesday afternoon when nothing unusual is happening at all. For just a few seconds, your heart becomes aware of an empty space that your mind cannot explain. You try to ignore it. You tell yourself you're simply tired. Maybe you're overthinking. Maybe you've watched too many romantic movies. But the feeling keeps returning. Not every day. Not even every week. Just enough to make you wonder why it refuses to disappear. Many people spend years searching for signs outside themselves while missing the quiet ones that begin within. Because before two lives meet, something inside both people begins changing. Almost like two clocks that have been separated for years, slowly beginning to tick in the same rhythm again. You don't hear the sound. You simply begin living differently. One morning, you wake up and realize you're no longer chasing the people who once consumed your attention. Arguments that used to keep you awake all night suddenly lose their power. You stop forcing conversations. You stop begging for clarity from people who never intended to give it. It isn't because you've become cold. It's because something inside you has quietly started making room. Most people think love begins with meeting someone. Sometimes. Love begins with letting go of everyone who isn't meant to stay. And here's the remarkable part. This change often happens before you even realize you're preparing for it. It's almost as though your future arrives in your heart long before it arrives in your life. Think about a theater before the audience enters. The lights are adjusted. The stage is cleaned. The musicians tune their instruments. Everything changes before the first scene begins. Life often works the same way. The greatest entrances are usually preceded by invisible preparation. Maybe that's why doors have been closing lately. Maybe friendships have faded. Maybe certain plans unexpectedly fell apart. At the time, it felt unfair. You questioned everything. You wondered whether life was moving backward instead of forward. But imagine trying to welcome someone extraordinary into a life that's already overflowing with things that no longer belong there. Sometimes what feels like loss is simply space being created. And space can be one of the most loving gifts life ever gives. Here's another sign that almost nobody talks about. You begin noticing people differently. Not because they're more attractive. Not because they've changed. Because your heart has changed. You become less impressed by appearances. The conversations that once entertained you now feel strangely empty. Meanwhile, a simple act of kindness from a stranger affects you more deeply than it ever would have before. You find yourself appreciating sincerity over perfection. Peace over excitement. Depth over attention. It's as though your soul has quietly changed the language it understands. You no longer crave the loudest voice in the room. You're drawn toward the safest one. And although you may not realize it yet, someone else is going through the exact same transformation. Perhaps they're sitting alone tonight after ending a relationship they thought would last forever. Perhaps they're questioning why everything they once wanted suddenly feels incomplete. Perhaps they're learning lessons that will allow them to recognize you when your paths finally cross. You don't know their name. You don't know their face. But life has an extraordinary way of preparing two hearts separately before allowing them to meet together. There is another sign that's easy to overlook because it doesn't feel spiritual at all. Your memories begin changing. Not disappearing. Changing. Old moments suddenly return to your mind for reasons you can't explain. A conversation from years ago. A forgotten road trip. A childhood promise. The smell of rain outside your grandparents' house. An old song you haven't heard in a decade suddenly plays somewhere unexpected. Why? Because memory isn't only about the past. Sometimes memory becomes the bridge that helps your heart understand what it's finally ready to receive. Life has a beautiful habit of reminding you who you've always been before introducing you to who you're becoming. And perhaps, before your soulmate recognizes your soul, you first have to remember it yourself. Have you noticed how certain dreams have become more vivid lately? Not necessarily dreams about romance. Dreams that leave behind emotions stronger than the images themselves. You wake up unable to remember every detail. Yet somehow, peace remains. Hope remains. A strange familiarity remains. Almost like your heart spent the night visiting a place your mind hasn't reached yet. Scientists may call it subconscious processing. Others may simply call it imagination. Whatever explanation you choose. Never underestimate what repeated feelings are trying to teach you. Sometimes truth arrives emotionally before it arrives logically. And maybe that's why your intuition has become louder lately. You pause before making decisions. You hesitate before saying yes. You notice tiny details other people completely ignore. It's not fear. It's awareness. Something inside you has become more sensitive. Not because you're becoming fragile. Because you're becoming aligned. Alignment rarely feels dramatic. Most of the time, it feels quiet. Like the calm surface of a lake moments before sunrise. Nothing appears to be happening. Yet beneath the surface, everything is moving. And that leads to a sign that changes everything once you finally understand it. The people who are wrong for you begin leaving without needing to be pushed away. Not all at once. Not with explosions. Sometimes they simply stop calling. They slowly drift into different lives. Conversations become shorter. Plans quietly disappear. At first, it hurts. You wonder what you did wrong. You replay every interaction searching for answers. But months later, you realize something remarkable. Had they stayed, there would have been no room for what was coming. Sometimes the greatest act of love isn't someone arriving. It's someone leaving exactly when they needed to. Because destiny doesn't only guide your steps. It also redirects everyone else's. And somewhere, without either of you realizing it, another life is being redirected too. Someone you've never met is taking a different road. Making a last-minute decision. Accepting a new opportunity. Missing one flight. Choosing one cafe instead of another. Tiny decisions that seem meaningless today. Yet one day you'll look back and realize they quietly built the path that led both of you to the same moment. And here's what makes that thought so extraordinary. Neither of you needed to know the destination. You only needed to keep walking. There is a question almost everyone asks at some point. If my soulmate is real, why haven't we met yet? It feels like a simple question. But hidden inside it is something much deeper. Maybe the better question is, who would we have been if we had met too soon? Imagine meeting the right person while carrying the wrong version of yourself. The version that still believed love had to be earned. The version that apologized for existing. The version that confused attention with affection and silence with rejection. Would you have recognized the person meant for you? Or would you have walked past them because your heart wasn't ready to believe it deserved something genuine? Timing is one of life's quiet miracles. It rarely makes sense while you're living through it. Only later do you notice that every delay carried its own purpose. Think about a seed buried beneath the ground. From above, it looks forgotten. Invisible. Still. If someone didn't know better, they might believe nothing was happening at all. But beneath the surface, roots are stretching into darkness. Strength is forming where no one can see it. Growth is happening in complete silence. Human hearts often grow the same way. The seasons that feel empty are sometimes the seasons doing the deepest work. And perhaps that's where you are today. Not forgotten. Not overlooked. Simply growing where no one else can yet see. There is another soulmate sign that almost always arrives unnoticed. Your definition of love begins to change. Without realizing it, you stop wishing for someone who will rescue you. Instead, you begin hoping for someone who will walk beside you. That single shift changes everything. Fairy tales often teach us that one extraordinary person appears and magically removes every fear. Real life whispers something different. The right person doesn't erase your storms. They remind you that you don't have to face them alone. Suddenly, you're no longer searching for perfection. You're searching for peace. And peace has a completely different feeling. It doesn't race your heartbeat. It steadies it. It doesn't leave you wondering where you stand. It quietly lets you breathe. If you've started valuing peace more than excitement, pay attention. That change didn't happen by accident. It's often one of the clearest signs your heart is preparing for lasting love instead of temporary emotion. Here's something else that surprises many people. The closer you come to meeting someone truly meaningful, the less interested you become in pretending. You stop trying to sound more impressive. You stop rehearsing conversations in your mind. You stop wearing emotional masks that once felt necessary. Because somewhere inside, you begin longing for someone who will know the real you. Not the polished version. Not the carefully edited version. The honest one. The one who laughs too loudly at certain jokes. The one who cries during movies no one else finds emotional. The one who still carries dreams they rarely tell anyone about. Authenticity becomes more attractive than approval. And when that happens, life quietly starts moving in your favor. Have you noticed how certain places suddenly feel different? A park you've visited 100 times. A bookstore you've walked through without much thought. A quiet coffee shop tucked between busy streets. Nothing has physically changed. Yet somehow, the atmosphere feels alive. Almost familiar. Almost welcoming. As if life is gently encouraging you to slow down instead of rushing past another ordinary day. Most people are so focused on arriving somewhere else that they forget to notice where they already are. But meaningful encounters rarely announce themselves. They appear inside ordinary afternoons. Between simple conversations. During moments that don't seem important until much later. That's why awareness is such a powerful gift. Not because it predicts the future, but because it allows you to fully experience the present. And the present has a funny way of introducing miracles disguised as routine. There is one sign that many people misunderstand. Silence. Not the uncomfortable silence after an argument. Not loneliness. A different kind of silence. The kind that settles over your life after you've finally stopped chasing what keeps running away. At first, it feels unfamiliar. You've spent so long filling every empty space with distractions. Music. Scrolling. Work. Noise. But eventually, you begin appreciating quiet. Because that's where your own thoughts become clear. And clarity changes everything. When the world grows quieter, your intuition grows louder. You begin recognizing what drains you. What restores you. Who genuinely celebrates your happiness. Who only appears when they need something. These realizations aren't random. They're preparation. Every healthy relationship begins with seeing clearly. Sometimes, the first person you finally see clearly is yourself. Now imagine someone you've never met going through this exact process. Perhaps tonight they're sitting on a balcony watching the sunset, realizing they no longer want relationships built on games. Perhaps they're deleting old conversations they kept rereading for months. Perhaps they're forgiving someone who never apologized. Not because the past suddenly became acceptable, but because they're tired of carrying it. Healing has an invisible rhythm. And sometimes two strangers begin healing at exactly the same time without ever knowing it. That thought alone is extraordinary. Because while you're wondering whether anyone understands your heart, someone else's heart may already be learning the language you'll one day speak together. Life often writes the most meaningful chapters separately before combining them into one story. There's another sign that's impossible to fake. Gratitude begins showing up in unexpected places. Not because life suddenly becomes perfect. It doesn't. Challenges still exist. Bills still arrive. Plans still change. But something inside you notices beauty more often. The warmth of sunlight through a window. The laughter of children playing nearby. A stranger holding the door open. Fresh coffee on a quiet morning. Rain tapping gently against the roof. Small moments become unforgettable. Why? Because gratitude expands your awareness. And awareness allows you to recognize blessings that hurry often misses. Maybe your soulmate isn't only someone you're meant to find. Maybe they're someone you'll only recognize because your heart finally slowed down enough to notice. That possibility changes everything. Because destiny isn't only about arrival. It's about recognition. Two people can stand only a few feet apart and never truly meet if neither one is present enough to see the other. Which brings us to one of the rarest signs of all. You stop asking, when will it happen? And you begin asking, who am I becoming while I wait? That question transforms waiting into growth. Days no longer feel wasted. They're becoming part of your foundation. You're learning patience, kindness, boundaries, forgiveness, courage. Qualities that cannot be rushed. And one day, someone will experience the warmth of those qualities without ever realizing how many quiet years it took to build them. Maybe that's the hidden blessing. The waiting wasn't empty. It was quietly shaping the version of you your future relationship will need. Just when you think the story is about finding another person, life reveals something unexpected. It has been preparing you all along. And there is one final sign. One so subtle that almost everyone overlooks it until the moment everything changes. Because it doesn't arrive with fireworks. It doesn't arrive with perfect timing. It arrives in a single moment. When your heart suddenly feels strangely familiar with someone you've only just met. And when that moment comes, you'll understand why every unanswered question had to remain unanswered until then. Picture this. You're moving through what seems like an ordinary day. Nothing feels extraordinary. The sky looks the way it always does. People hurry past without noticing one another. Your mind is occupied with errands, responsibilities, and the countless little thoughts that fill a normal afternoon. Then it happens. Not with dramatic music. Not with the world suddenly standing still. Just one moment. One glance. One conversation. One unexpected feeling that quietly says, I've been here before. Your mind insists that's impossible. You've never met this person. You've never heard their voice. You've never shared a memory together. Yet your heart responds with an unmistakable sense of familiarity. Not because you know their story, but because something about their presence feels strangely safe. Many people mistake instant comfort for excitement. They're not the same thing. Excitement burns brightly. Comfort glows gently. Excitement demands attention. Comfort asks for nothing. It simply allows you to be yourself. That's one of the most overlooked soulmate signs. Not butterflies. Not confusion. Not emotional chaos. But a quiet feeling that says, I don't need to become someone else here. Have you ever noticed how rare that feeling really is? Most of us spend years trying to fit into places that never truly fit us. We adjust our personalities. We soften our opinions. We hide pieces of ourselves because we're afraid they won't be accepted. After enough time, pretending becomes a habit. Then someone comes along. And without even trying, they make honesty feel easier than performance. That's not something you force. That's something you recognize. It's like finally putting down a heavy backpack you forgot you were carrying. Suddenly, breathing feels lighter. Conversations flow without effort. Silence doesn't feel awkward. Even ordinary moments become meaningful. Because the connection isn't built on trying to impress each other. It's built on feeling understood. And understanding is one of the rarest gifts two people can share. But before that day arrives, life often gives you one last lesson. It asks whether you're willing to stop chasing certainty. We all want guarantees. We want to know exactly when love will arrive. Exactly who it will be. Exactly how everything will unfold. But certainty has never been the language of meaningful journeys. Faith is. Not blind faith. Hopeful faith. The kind that allows you to keep your heart open without demanding immediate answers. Think about every beautiful sunrise you've ever witnessed. You never pulled the sun into the sky. You simply trusted that morning would come. Love often asks for the same quiet trust. Not because life enjoys making people wait, but because some things lose their beauty when they're rushed. A melody played too quickly loses its emotion. A flower forced to bloom opens before it's ready. A relationship built on urgency often struggles to survive ordinary days. The strongest connections rarely begin with perfect timing. They begin with two people who have learned how to value what truly matters. Maybe that's why your priorities have shifted. Maybe success doesn't impress you the way it once did. Maybe endless attention no longer feels satisfying. Maybe your heart has started searching for something quieter. Someone who listens more than they speak. Someone who notices small details. Someone who remembers the stories you tell. Someone who makes ordinary life feel extraordinary simply by being present. Those desires aren't signs that you're asking for too much. They're signs that you're no longer willing to settle for too little. And that changes the path ahead. Because the moment you stop accepting relationships that drain your spirit, you become available for one that restores it. Here's something beautiful to consider. What if your soulmate is also wondering if they're too late? What if they're lying awake tonight asking questions almost identical to yours? What if they've experienced disappointment that made them question whether real love still exists? What if they've spent years becoming the person someone else will someday be grateful to meet? Sometimes we imagine we're waiting alone. But perhaps two lives are quietly moving toward each other from opposite directions. Each carrying lessons. Each carrying scars. Each carrying hope. Like two rivers beginning miles apart. Neither river knows exactly where the other begins. Yet both continue flowing. Not because they can already see the ocean, but because that's what rivers are meant to do. One day, without forcing anything, they meet. Not by accident. By becoming exactly what they were created to become. Maybe people are more like rivers than we realize. The goal isn't to chase every possibility. The goal is to keep growing. To keep healing. To keep becoming someone capable of giving and receiving genuine love. And when two people do that, Their meeting becomes less about luck and more about readiness. That may be the hidden blessing you've been overlooking all along. You've been measuring progress by who hasn't arrived yet. Life has been measuring progress by who you're becoming. Those are two very different journeys. One creates frustration. The other creates peace. Peace doesn't mean you've stopped hoping. It means hope is no longer controlled by fear. Imagine looking back 5 years from now. Imagine remembering this season of your life. Will you remember only the waiting? Or will you remember the strength you discovered because of it? The kindness you learned. The patience you developed. The courage it took to keep believing even when nothing seemed to be changing. Those things matter. Because love doesn't simply enter a life. It enters a person. And the person you are becoming today will shape every conversation, every smile, every ordinary morning you one day share with someone else. So if you've been searching desperately for signs, perhaps this is the one you needed most. Your heart is becoming calmer instead of louder. Your hope is becoming steadier instead of desperate. Your future is no longer built on fear of being alone. It's built on quiet confidence that what is genuine never needs to be forced. Maybe your soulmate isn't just someone you're searching for. Maybe they're someone who is also learning patience, learning forgiveness, learning trust. So that when your paths finally cross, neither of you has to pretend. You'll simply recognize what has been growing inside both of you all along. And when that day comes, you'll probably smile at how ordinary it looked. No perfect soundtrack. No dramatic announcement. Just a simple moment that quietly changes everything. You'll realize that every closed door, every delay, every unanswered prayer, every unexpected detour wasn't keeping love away from you. It was gently guiding both of you toward a meeting that neither heart was ready for before. Until then, keep becoming the person your future will thank you for being. Protect your peace. Choose kindness even when it's difficult. Believe that your story is still unfolding, even on the days when nothing seems to happen. Some of life's greatest chapters are written long before they're read. If this message found you at exactly the right moment, take it as a reminder to keep your heart open and your hope alive. And if you believe someone else might need this encouragement today, share this video with them. If you'd like to keep receiving stories that inspire hope, healing, and quiet faith in life's journey, subscribe and join us for the next one. Finally, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Which of these signs spoke to your heart the most, and have you ever experienced a moment that felt too meaningful to be just a coincidence?